Jake felt the familiar urge to say no, to not trust that something this good could really be happening to him. But then he looked through the window at Emma and Bentley playing in the backyard, and he realized that sometimes, when life offers you a second chance, the bravest thing you can do is say yes. "Partners?" he asked, extending his hand. "Partners," Victoria confirmed, shaking it firmly. 6 months later, Sterling Morrison Home Design was booked solid for the next year. Jake had moved Emma into a house in Victoria's neighborhood, not as grand as hers, but more space than they'd ever dreamed of. Emma had her own room, a backyard for Bentley, who split his time between both houses, and a college fund that grew a little every month. But more than the financial security, Jake had found something he'd never expected: a chosen family. Victoria had become like a sister to him, and Emma had gained an honorary aunt who spoiled her with love and opportunities. "You know what the funny thing is?" Victoria said one evening as they sat on her back porch, watching Emma play with Bentley in the fading light. "What's that? I spent my whole marriage trying to have it all, the perfect house, the successful business, the ideal life. But I never felt as rich as I do right now, watching that little girl play with my dog in a backyard that actually gets used." Jake smiled, understanding exactly what she meant. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what you were really looking for. As the sun set over Millbrook, Connecticut, 3 people and 1 golden retriever settled into their evening routine. It wasn't the family any of them had planned for, but it was the family they'd chosen, built not on blood or law, but on kindness, trust, and the simple recognition that everyone deserves to belong somewhere. Sometimes fate works in the most surprising ways. Sometimes it takes the form of a lost dog on a rainy night, bringing together people who needed each other more than they ever could have imagined. And sometimes the greatest wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in the moments when you realize you're exactly where you're meant to be. The end. The morning sun, streaming through Jake's kitchen window, felt different somehow, warmer, more promising. Emma had woken up before her alarm, something that never happened, and was already in the backyard playing fetch with their overnight guest. "Daddy, look how smart he is," Emma called through the screen door. "He knows sit and stay and everything." Jake smiled over his coffee, watching his daughter laugh in a way that made his chest ache with both joy and fear. They couldn't keep the dog. He knew that, but seeing Emma so happy made the inevitable goodbye feel impossible. His phone buzzed with a text from his boss at Miller's Hardware. "Can you come in early today? Big delivery coming." Jake sighed. Another long day ahead, but the overtime would help with Emma's school supplies. I need to head to work early today. Mrs. Patterson will walk you to school, okay?" "What about—" Emma gestured toward the golden retriever, who was now sitting perfectly at her feet, looking between them as if following the conversation. "I'll put up some flyers on my lunch break. Someone's probably looking for him." But as Jake printed out, "Found dog flyers" at work, using the store's computer when his manager wasn't looking, he felt a strange reluctance. Each flyer felt like giving away something precious, even though he knew it wasn't his to keep. Around noon, Jake was posting flyers around Elmwood Avenue, the upscale neighborhood where he'd found the dog, when a black Mercedes SUV pulled up beside him. The window rolled down to reveal a woman in her early 40s with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive sunglasses. "Excuse me," she said, her voice carrying the crisp confidence that comes with never having to worry about money. "I couldn't help but notice your flyer. Can I see it?" Jake handed her one of the papers, watching as her composed expression cracked slightly. "Oh my God," she whispered, pulling off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting she'd been crying recently. "This is Bentley. This is my dog." Jake felt his stomach drop, though he wasn't sure if it was relief or disappointment. "You're sure?" "Absolutely." He's been missing for 3 days. I've been driving around for hours every day, putting up my own flyers, calling every shelter within 50 miles. She looked up at Jake with genuine gratitude. Where did you find him? Right here on Elmwood last night around 8. He was under that oak tree, soaking wet. The woman, who introduced herself as Victoria Sterling, followed Jake back to his duplex. The contrast between her pristine SUV and his neighborhood was stark, but Victoria didn't seem to notice or care. When they arrived, Emma was in the front yard with Bentley, having just gotten home from school. The moment the dog saw Victoria, his entire body went into overdrive, tail wagging, jumping, whining with joy. "Bentley!" Victoria knelt down as 60 pounds of golden retriever launched into her arms. "I was so worried about you, baby. I was so scared." Jake watched the reunion with mixed emotions. It was clearly the right thing. The dog belonged with Victoria. But watching Emma's face as she realized what was happening broke his heart. "Is the pretty lady taking him home now?" Emma asked quietly, standing beside Jake. "Yes, sweetheart. Bentley belongs with her." Victoria, still hugging her dog, looked up at Jake and Emma. "I can't even begin to thank you. I've been absolutely beside myself. Bentley is..." She paused, her voice catching. "He's all I have left." There was something in her tone that made Jake look at her more carefully. Despite the expensive clothes and car, Victoria's eyes held a sadness he recognized. The kind that comes from loss that money can't fix. "Would you like to come in for a coffee?" Jake found himself asking. "Emma's been taking good care of him. Maybe she'd like to say goodbye properly." Victoria hesitated for a moment, clearly unused to being invited into homes like Jake's. But something in Emma's hopeful expression made her nod. Inside, as Emma showed Victoria all the things they'd done with Bentley, the tricks they'd practiced, the spot where he'd slept, the bowl they'd used for his water, Victoria listened with an attention that seemed almost desperate. "You've taken such good care of him," Victoria said to Emma. "He looks happy, relaxed." "We gave him mac and cheese," Emma announced proudly. "Daddy said it wasn't dog food, but Bentley liked it anyway." Victoria laughed. The first genuine laugh Jake had heard from her. "Mac and cheese was my favorite when I was your age too." As they talked, Jake learned that Victoria was recently widowed. Her husband had died in a car accident 8 months ago, leaving her with more money than she could ever need, but none of the things that actually mattered. Bentley had been their dog together, and losing him had felt like losing the last piece of her old life. "I've been rattling around in that big house, just me and Bentley," Victoria admitted. "I keep thinking I should downsize, maybe move somewhere smaller, but I can't seem to make any decisions anymore." Jake understood that paralysis. The way grief could freeze you in place, making even simple choices feel impossible. "I work 2 jobs just to keep this place," Jake said, surprising himself with his honesty. "But it's home, you know? Sometimes it's not about the size of the space, it's about what fills it." Victoria looked around the modest living room, at Emma's drawings on the refrigerator, the worn but clean furniture, the sense of life being actively lived despite obvious financial constraints. "You're right," she said quietly. "This feels more like a home than anywhere I've been in months." When it was time for Victoria to leave, Emma hugged Bentley goodbye with the stoic acceptance of a child who'd learned not to expect good things to last. "Will we see him again?" Emma asked Victoria. Victoria knelt down to Emma's level. "Would you like to? I mean, if it's okay with your dad, maybe Bentley could visit sometimes. He seems to really love you." Jake started to protest. He didn't want Emma getting attached to something they couldn't have, but the hope in his daughter's eyes stopped him. "We'll see," he said, the parents' classic non-answer. But Victoria was already pulling out her phone. "Actually, I have an idea. Jake, you said you work at Miller's Hardware." "Yeah, why?" "I'm renovating my house." "Well, I'm supposed to be. I bought all these supplies months ago, but I can't seem to get started. What if..." What if you could help me? I'd pay you, of course. Probably better than what you're making at the store. Jake's pride bristled slightly. I don't need charity. It's not charity, Victoria said firmly. I need help and you clearly know what you're doing. Emma could come too after school. Bentley would love the company, and honestly... She paused, looking vulnerable for the first time. I could use the company too. That weekend, Jake found himself standing in the foyer of Victoria's mansion in the hills outside Millbrook. The house was beautiful, but felt empty, like a museum where no one actually lived. I want to turn this into a real home again, Victoria explained as she showed Jake around. But every time I start, I just freeze up. Emma, meanwhile, was running through the enormous backyard with Bentley, both of them ecstatic to be reunited. As Jake began working on Victoria's renovation projects, starting with a simple kitchen update, something unexpected happened. Victoria didn't just hire him and disappear. She rolled up her sleeves and worked alongside him, asking questions, learning, slowly coming back to life. I haven't felt useful in months, she admitted one afternoon as they painted kitchen cabinets together. After David died, everyone wanted to take care of me. The lawyers, the accountants, even the housekeeper. No one wanted me to actually do anything. Sometimes you need to build something with your own hands, Jake said, understanding exactly what she meant. Makes you remember you're still here, still capable. Over the following weeks, an unlikely friendship developed. Emma would come straight from school to Victoria's house, where she'd help with small tasks while playing with Bentley. Jake would arrive after his shift at Miller's, and they'd work on the house until dinner time. Victoria insisted on providing dinner, elaborate meals that were a far cry from Jake's usual mac and cheese. But more than the food, it was the conversation around the dinner table that began to heal something in both of them. I never thought I wanted kids, Victoria admitted. One evening, as they watched Emma teach Bentley a new trick, David and I were so focused on our careers, on building the business. Now I wonder what we were building it all for. Jake looked at his daughter, who was giggling as Bentley attempted to roll over. Sometimes the best things happen when you're not planning for them. 3 months later, Jake stood in Victoria's completely transformed kitchen, admiring their work. The house felt alive now, warm, lived in, full of the kind of details that make a house a home. I have something to ask you, Victoria said, her voice nervous in a way Jake had never heard before. What's that? I want to offer you a job, a real job. I'm starting a home renovation business, Sterling Home Design. I want you to run it. With me, equal partners. Jake stared at her, sure he'd misunderstood. Victoria, I can't. Yes, you can. You're the most talented craftsman I've ever worked with. And more than that, you understand what makes a house feel like home. I have the business knowledge and the capital. You have the skills and the heart. Together we could build something amazing. A poor single dad found a lost dog. Then the millionaire woman who owned it changed his life. The autumn rain drummed against the cracked windshield of Jake Morrison's 15-year-old Honda Civic as he pulled into the parking lot of Miller's hardware store. At 34, Jake carried the weight of the world on his shoulders, the kind of exhaustion that comes from working 2 jobs while raising a 7-year-old daughter alone. Another 12-hour shift down, he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. The fluorescent lights of the hardware store had been particularly harsh today, and his back ached from lifting heavy boxes of screws, paint cans, and power tools. But Jake never complained, not out loud anyway. This job, combined with his weekend gig at the local diner, barely kept food on the table and a roof over their heads, but it was honest work. As he drove through the winding streets of Millbrook, Connecticut, Jake's mind wandered to his daughter Emma. She'd been asking for new school supplies, nothing fancy, just some colored pencils and a decent backpack. Her current one was held together with duct tape, and Jake had noticed how she tried to hide it from her classmates. The thought made his chest tighten, with a familiar ache of inadequacy. Next paycheck, he promised himself, the same promise he'd been making for months. The rain was coming down harder now, turning the quiet suburban streets into rivers of reflected streetlight. Jake was taking his usual shortcut through Elmwood Avenue, the nicer part of town where the houses had circular driveways and perfectly manicured lawns, when he saw something that made him slam on his brakes. There, huddled under a large oak tree, was a small golden retriever. The dog was soaking wet, shivering, and clearly lost. Its fur was matted against its body, and even from his car, Jake could see the animal was scared and confused. Jake sat in his idling car for a moment, the windshield wipers creating a rhythmic soundtrack to his internal debate. He was already running late. Emma was waiting at Mrs. Patterson's house next door, probably doing homework and wondering where her dad was. Money was tight, and the last thing they needed was another mouth to feed, even temporarily. But as he watched the dog attempt to find shelter under the increasingly inadequate tree cover, Jake couldn't drive away. His own father had abandoned them when Jake was 12, leaving him with a mother who worked 3 jobs just to survive. He knew what it felt like to be alone and scared. "Damn it," he whispered, pulling over to the curb. Jake stepped out into the rain, immediately feeling the cold water seep through his worn work jacket. He approached the dog slowly, his hands visible and non-threatening. "Hey there, buddy," he called softly. "What are you doing out here all alone?" The golden retriever looked up at him with the most expressive brown eyes Jake had ever seen. The dog was beautiful, clearly well cared for under normal circumstances. Its collar was expensive-looking leather, with what appeared to be real silver hardware, though the name tag was missing. "Come here, boy, or girl." Jake knelt down, extending his hand. The dog hesitated for a moment, then slowly approached, tail wagging tentatively. As Jake's fingers made contact with the wet fur, he felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time, a simple moment of pure connection. The dog leaned into his touch, and Jake could feel the animal's relief at finding a kind human. "You're definitely not from around here, are you?" Jake examined the dog more closely. This was clearly a purebred golden retriever, probably worth more than Jake made in 3 months. The collar, the dog's obvious training and good health, everything suggested this animal belonged to someone with money. Jake's first instinct was to call animal control, but something stopped him. Maybe it was the way the dog looked at him, or maybe it was his own experience with being let down by systems that were supposed to help. Either way, he found himself opening his car door. "Come on, let's get you dried off. We'll figure this out tomorrow." The drive home was surreal. The dog sat perfectly in the passenger seat, occasionally looking over at Jake as if to say thank you. Jake found himself talking to the animal, something he rarely did with humans these days. "I've got a daughter, you know, Emma. She's 7, and she's been begging me for a pet for years. Never could afford one, and honestly, I wasn't sure I could handle something else depending on me." He glanced over at his unexpected passenger. "But you seem pretty self-sufficient." When they arrived at Jake's modest duplex, the contrast between this neighborhood and where he'd found the dog was stark. Here cars were older, yards were smaller, and the American dream felt more like an American struggle. But it was home. Jake's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, met them at the door with Emma bouncing behind her. "Daddy, you brought a dog!" Emma's eyes lit up in a way Jake hadn't seen in months. At 7, she still believed in magic and happy endings, despite their circumstances. "Just for tonight, sweetheart. This little guy is lost, and we're going to help him find his way home." But as Emma knelt down and the golden retriever immediately went to her, tail wagging furiously, Jake felt his resolve weakening. The two seemed to have an instant connection. Emma's gentle hands stroking the dog's head while she whispered secrets that made the animal's tail wag even harder. "What's his name, Daddy?" Jake looked at the expensive collar with no identification. "I don't know, Em. We'll have to ask around tomorrow. Put up some flyers, maybe." That evening, Jake watched from the kitchen as Emma shared her modest dinner of mac and cheese with their temporary guest. The dog ate politely, clearly well-trained, but there was something in its eyes that suggested gratitude beyond just the food. After Emma went to bed, with the dog curled up beside her despite Jake's protests, Jake sat at his small kitchen table, laptop open, searching lost pet websites and social media groups. He knew he should be looking forward to returning the dog quickly, but a part of him dreaded it. For the first time in years, their little house felt full. Not just with the physical presence of another living being, but with something harder to define: hope, maybe, or just the simple joy that comes from doing something good without expecting anything in return. As Jake finally headed to bed, he checked on Emma one more time. She was fast asleep, one arm draped over the golden retriever who looked up at Jake with those expressive eyes. "Don't get too comfortable," Jake whispered to the dog. "Someone's probably worried sick about you." But even as he said it, Jake wondered if anyone in his life had ever worried about him the way he was already starting to worry about this lost animal. Tomorrow, he would do the right thing and find the dog's real home. Tonight, though, he allowed himself to imagine what it might be like to have something good stay in their lives for once. Outside, the rain continued to fall, washing the streets, clean and carrying away another day of small struggles and smaller victories. But inside Jake Morrison's modest duplex, 3 hearts beat in rhythm: a father learning to hope again, a daughter dreaming of keeping what she'd found, and a lost dog who had perhaps found exactly where it was meant to be. Thank you for watching this story unfold with us here on M&A The Story Unfolds. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new tale. We'd love to know where you're watching from. Leave a comment below and tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. Your support means everything. See you in the next story.